Welcome back to the Dialing for Dollars podcast, where we're talking about life insurance sales and everything that happens between the first dial and the death benefit. I'm Corey Mitchell, joined as always by my co-host Taiwan Somerville. Together, we sit down with fellow agents, top performers, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders to unpack what actually works to help new agents win faster. Today, we have Joe Skelley. Joe is the Director of Retirement Education and Strategy for Lasting Mark, and is here to help new agents leverage joint work partnerships to add income streams and learn how to sell more advanced products. Joe, welcome to the show.
Yeah, Corey, it's good to be here, man. Appreciate you guys inviting me on. Ty, it's
Yeah.
good to see you also.
What's happening, brother?
Yes. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. What got you into insurance, and kind of what led you here?
Yeah, so my name's Joe Skelley. I live in Pennsylvania, just outside the city of Philadelphia. Born and raised, never left. This is all I know. And yeah, everything you hear about us out here is 100% true, especially as it pertains to our sports teams, right?
Oh yeah.
But I've been married to my wife since 2005. Two beautiful kids. I have my son Dominic, who's now living down in Florida. He just moved down a couple of months ago, and then turning 25, and my daughter 16, going on 25. And for me, over the last 15 years, have just been involved, in the insurance space. I've always been, I had an entrepreneurial spirit. We've had other businesses, more of like your traditional style businesses, and my wife is up until this year here has been running a breakfast and lunch restaurant. We've actually in the process of selling that, and after 28 years, going to be moving on from that business. But in addition to insurance, a partner in a drug and alcohol rehab facility out in Ohio. Again, my wife was running a restaurant, breakfast and lunch restaurant for all those years, and then I've been involved in insurance. That's really like my day to day. Got started with American General Life and Accident. So, the old AGLA days, I worked as a captive agent. Did that for a couple of years and then kind of moved into the independent space, really doing everything in this business along the way with the exception of, of Medicare, that being by design. And, with all the different, traditional pieces of insurance that we did, just kind of transitioned into kind of like the retirement solution side of our industry a number of years back. And that's really what led me to the position that I'm in here today with Lasting Mark. I think really just the experiences, on all things index universal life, whole life, ULs, right? Annuities, those retirement conversations. Gives me an opportunity to be more agent facing with individuals like yourself to just kind of, I guess, give back, all of the information that's been given to me. I mean, that's really what I do every day. Just kind of take all the things that have been given to me over the years and hand over to the agents. I always say the only difference between me and a lot of the people that I talk with is I've been around just a little bit longer. That's it. Been having these conversations a little bit longer. So
Yeah.
something I absolutely love. I do love the industry. I tell all agents, I think that this business, as long as you're meant to be in it. I knew from a very like early on that I really enjoyed the industry, even though I can't say that I saw myself here prior to getting involved. I think
Makes
one of the
sense.
things you have to do as an agent is, then just try to figure out what conversation in this space you're most passionate about,
Yeah.
and I think once you do that, it just kind of goes from there. But those first few years are always tough, just kind of getting in and learning and building it up. But after a few years, I feel like you're off and running in this business.
Yeah. I don't know anybody who woke up one day and said, "I want to sell insurance. That sounds fun." But it's amazing
No,
how passionate people get about it when they get into the industry and start actually having those kind of conversations.
it is. In fact, the only reason did the interview is I actually can remember my son at his basketball practice, and I was just sitting in the car, burning time, and I was definitely looking for an opportunity. I can't say no. Listen, clearly I wasn't looking for insurance, but I'll tell you guys this: I liked the individual that I was talking to. His name was Brian Dickerson. I mean, he had spent years, he had a ceramic tile business. You know what I mean? And he just as he got older his knees and back couldn't handle it anymore, and he decided to sell his business. And he took around look around also and ended up in insurance. But he took that hard work and like blue collar work ethic that he had, and he applied it to insurance, and he was doing really well with it. And I'm like, well, there was a lot of things I could relate to with him. And honestly, if it weren't for him, taking that approach with me, in the interview, and then kind of being there to do some of the things we'll talk about today, joint work. I don't think I would be on the podcast with the two of you here today. So it's interesting how it all works out, man.
Yeah, yeah. New agents coming in. There's always so much to learn. Like all the life insurance products, and then how they vary between carriers, and then you add the retirement planning space onto it. There's just so much information. So, I mean, let's start there. Like, what is joint work, and why is it important for new agents to use it in their business?
Well, and so, first thing I would say is, I've personally never asked anybody to do anything, especially in this space that I haven't personally done myself, right? So when we talk about joint work, I mean, that's how I learned. And so really what it is, like, and I'll tell you guys, going through you go through the insurance exam, it's like, oh my God, it's like, and I've never been a good studier or test taker. So for me, that was a drag. Kind of overwhelmed myself through that process. But then I started thinking, I was like, I'm going to go and work with American General Life and Accident. I mean, there's a whole suite of products, and a part of me as I was going through like some of the training, I'm thinking, man, how am I ever going to know this stuff, right? I mean, it was all so brand new. I come from the world of sales, but this was a completely different, conversation, right? And so I had the opportunity to, understand, the way that they almost require it, in that world is that you'll do joint work where, you know, you will go out there and have those conversations. Now they give you the list of 100 in that world. And basically what that is when you're going through your training is you better put up a list of about 100 to 125, family members and friends and just anybody in your contact list, because that's how you're going to begin your journey, right? And so
Oops.
I didn't love that. I don't think my
Not a fan
family
either.
Never
my
do.
family and friends didn't either, right? But there was always going to be those handful of people that helped you out, to really just first of all they had a need, but then they also just giving you direction. Family always look out for you that way. But what we ended up doing was I went to work with Brian, right? So then he would come out and he's somebody that really understood everything from start to finish, and it gave me a job or gave me an opportunity to sit down and work with him. And I kind of looked at it as like on the job paid training.
Mhm.
So we were going to sit down and, basically I had to book the appointment. My only job was to, get them interested enough. I won't say excited, but interested enough to want to sit down and have a conversation. And then Brian came in and kind of led that discussion. And what we did is we actually split the commission in half. But it gave me a chance to, really learn the process, right? Like, and I was ultimately on it's like a need to know basis, right? There was no need to worry about learning everything, right? Like, let's just get the appointments on the books. And then, you have somebody that can kind of take the reins and guide you through that conversation. And then it gave me a chance to hear the questions that were asked. I mean, you do get a lot of questions, but what I learned quickly, they're the same questions in every appointment, right?
Yeah,
So, for the most part, you're only going to hear so many different questions. So, how he was able to handle those, overcome some of the objections, and then, really just from that very first phone call, taking them through the conversation. I mean, back then, it was like, much more of an emphasis on like a needs analysis and that whole fact finder that we had to go through and,
Mhm.
and then just try to determine, ultimately which product was going to make the most sense, given the situation. So, for me, like I said, it just we wouldn't be having this conversation today without those humble beginnings, without because even when I had to go out and do some things on my own, he still had to talk me off the ledge. So having that mentor in the space to kind of like, keep me on track, because, I guess as they say, you don't know what you don't know. I mean, some of the things that were going on were what we all deal with. Even if you've been around 15 years, I deal with the same things that somebody's been around for, just a handful of months, right? But I just better understand how to, to deal with the ebbs and flows of the business now.
yeah,
So I would just tell you that, having, somebody to be a mentor in the business, not only to kind of learn the conversations, it's also good to have somebody that you can kind of lean on, when you're getting off and running in this business. So
yeah,
joint work is, I always say joint work works.
yeah. Yeah, I came from a captive agency, and they had the same approach. You do the big fact finder. You try to figure out all the things that the person might need help with whether it be insurance or retirement or health insurance or whatever the case is. And then you engage your partners to do joint work with so that you have an expert running the appointment. And it's a great way to learn, to hear the questions, to hear another sales style. Um, so when we're looking at doing joint work, what kind of products or what kind of situations would an agent uh, engage with joint work or reach out to you guys to help with?
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll just kind of answer those questions. There's two approaches to what we do, right? Especially, especially with a lot of the conversations that I'm having, more on like what we refer to like the traditional life side. So when you can think of our retirement team, and you think of the on-track retirement plan, and again our retirement team, we don't want to just be looked at as the annuity guys and gals, right? Like we want it to be clear that there's a lot of different things that we can do, utilizing, more of the traditional life, concepts as well. So, it depending on where an agent is, I mean, in their career, some have a little bit more experience than others. The first thing that we talk about is what we would call, empower, which is an opportunity for, the agent to really kind of, be in charge of the meeting that is, right? Like they're going to get together and they're going to handle that conversation with the client, but they may need some help with, getting illustrations together, making sure they're considering the best product, for the individual, right? Like, is this an index universal life? Is this really the best approach given, the goals of the client? Anybody that gets a chance to know me knows, like I learned early on in this business, I've never wanted to be somebody that wanted to go out and sell a product in this business. I have zero interest in doing that. I want to take an opportunity to really get to know the client. Talk to them
Hmm.
like I would my family and friends, considering that's how I got started, right? You'll have a similar conversation and then just take that consultative approach, like just educate them, right? But if you can find out exactly what it is that they're looking to accomplish, and then we can mesh it up with the appropriate carrier and product, at that point, we're going back and we're providing a solution. We're not selling product, and that's I'm real big on that. So, if I'm doing joint work, then I want to get an opportunity to understand a little bit about the client. And again, maybe they're comfortable to go and have the conversation, but they need a little bit of help with some of the things I just mentioned. So we're helping with the illustration. Maybe giving them some key points to talk about in their meeting. Maybe there's questions with application, but we're kind of a support piece behind the scenes. The agent's going to kind of take the lead. That's a situation where they'll be able to go out there and earn 100% of their commission, right? Because they really didn't need to lean on somebody to run that appointment. But as I like to say, if you're stepping into this and maybe coming from say like final expense or mortgage protection, and you're like, what, this conversation is just a little too big for me, then I say, hey, let's work a few of these types of cases together, where you'll learn how to, run this type of an appointment. Then what we're doing is we're basically taking it from start to finish with the agent involved. Do you really want to have that, that agent that makes the referral, basically involved every step of the way? So they're in the meeting with you. I always want the agent to think of this analogy, like think of the medical world, right? You have your primary care physician, and there's a lot of things we can go in and see our primary care doctors for, and they could take care of us. But, if I'm to go in there and tell them that I'm having I feel like something's wrong with the ticker, and that primary care physician, is to send me to, he's going to schedule me for open heart surgery in a week. I'm probably going to go get a second opinion, right? So the idea is we use specialists, right? So then they're going to refer you to a specialist, and we're going to go see them and have them take a look. But if you know that everything kind of flows through that primary care physician, right? I mean, they are the lead on it. All the notes are making their way back, and together as a team, they're taking care of people's overall, a personal health, right? I look at us working the same way. That agent is the primary care physician. We're the specialist, and we're going to work as a team to take care of their financial health. So I think if you can kind of just think of it that way, and understand that's kind of how we work. That the agent is the point of contact. They're the lead. It's their book of business. I mean, we're just here to be an extension of the service that they have ultimately already provided. A lot of times it's, they did, some type of a policy for them, and then, another need pops up and we're able to kind of step in and help. And the clients love the team concept. And what I love about, Lasting Mark, is this is really like, we try to be as much of a one-stop shop in the world of insurance as we can be. That, most of the financial needs that our clients have can be serviced right here. But our agents do not have to miss an opportunity because, they're not familiar with that product or that conversation. They can lean in on the specialists. So, it's an opportunity to be able to, as I like to say, with everybody's, expertise, as say final expense, mortgage protection, Medicare, whatever you're doing every day, keep the main thing, and what you can do is then, find these opportunities, refer them over. And, these agents are making 50% of the commission right on Elevate. So, if it's Empower, we're going to help them do everything they need to do, and they'll make 100% of the commission. If the conversation's a little bit too large for them, we step in and we'll do everything from start to finish, and we do a 50-50 split. So the agent sees 50% of that commission. And we just kind of follow the lead of the agent, and some of them will come to us and say, hey, now, I'm going to stay in my lane. I really don't ever want to learn it, but, I'll be involved in the
Yeah.
conversation. Let me just make the referral and let me see my 50% and we'll keep this thing moving. Other agents do come around and say, hey, I would like the opportunity to be able to, to be able to blend that into my business, but I just need to learn what I'm doing first. And that's where we'll kind of go to work and do a few appointments together. I think the biggest mistake that agents make is thinking that they can go out there and handle the conversation because they don't want to give up, any commission. And I always tell you, 100% of nothing is nothing,
Yeah.
right? So, don't make the mistake of thinking that you can handle it on your own. I mean, a lot of times we see missed opportunities by agents because they think that they can go out and handle it. Like I said, our agenda is really just to, yeah, do joint work because that's the business side of it, especially if we're taking the lead. But, if an agent's looking to blend it into their practice, then the agenda is to help them learn. So how
Yeah.
many appointments is that going to take before they feel comfortable that they can do it on their own? Well, that's going to be up to the agent.
Yeah. We see a lot of agents now are starting to try to look at IULs just to get a little bit bigger cases than the final expense plans. And the questions are, how do you build it for cash value? How do you build it to make sure it doesn't lapse? How do you make sure that the covers last for a certain amount of time? And there's all those pitfalls that new agents don't know about IULs, for example. So it'd be pretty a great way to get with you guys and run a couple of appointments together and then learn how to sell it on your own. That's kind of what we're seeing. What other kind of categories or products do you look at, like retirement planning, estate planning, advanced markets? Like where all do we, what all
Yeah, I
products
mean,
can we come to you for?
no, so listen, that's another really great question. So, what you want to be looking out for, I think, when you consider opportunities, is there's really quite a few strategies. Obviously, a lot of individuals are aware of, index universal life and the cash, building component there. And we can touch on that a little further if you guys want, but there's that opportunity, kind of like that alternative to the 401k. I mean, being a small business owner, right? Came into this thing being a small business owner. We didn't have a 401k available to us. I was able to, one of the, I was my first client. My wife was number two, right? Because we looked at it as, we have no plan for our future. But even more importantly, was the living benefits component of it, critical, chronic, and terminal illness riders that are built into these IULs. We always looked at it as if, we had an unfortunate medical situation and say my wife was, out of work, out of that restaurant, even if she wanted to be in there, but, she physically couldn't be with her health. We had an alternative, like, to help our bottom line, right? We could access up to 90% of that cash value, 85 to 90%, without any, um, without, just depending on the debilitation of the illness, and then without, having to really worry about, how are we going to survive this thing? We always looked at the living benefits as being equally as important and really the more likely scenario than even the death benefit early on. But understanding that, the hope was that we never had to deal with either of those situations. It was the cash accumulation, participating in the upside of the market with the IUL and eliminating the downside risk, right? So it's a really great, opportunity for, anybody that's looking for, that cash accumulation. Like you hear it as the tax-free retirement. Small business owners, I mean, individuals that maybe cap out on the 401k, capping out on the Roth. I see the younger generation, they're, with all the stuff that's out there on social media. I mean, the education is a portion of it's out there. It gets them at least excited to learn more. And there's a lot of, gray areas. They come to us to really connect the dots. But I find that a lot of the, that younger generation, I mean, they're looking for these tax-free ideas, and we use whole life, for the purposes of eliminating debt. We put ourselves in a position to, help people, think about eliminating debt, right? If you're coming into this thing, I'm 48 years old, and you start to think about retirement, down the road, which is that 65 age, range. But one of the things that I see is a lot of folks dragging their debt into retirement with them. Well, as an
Oof.
advisor, we have an opportunity now to help them eliminate debt, along the way, right now until retirement, so that they can go into retirement without those responsibilities, being present. Now, our expenses aren't going anywhere but up. But, if we can not only help them, basically build that tax-free asset, but at the same time shed, liabilities along the way, we put our clients in a much better situation in retirement, which then leads into, a lot of the work that we do as part of the retirement team, which is, our on-track retirement plan, which, really is an extremely thorough plan for our clients, right? So anybody that's heading into retirement already there, it's a way for us just to, make sure, even if they have financial advisors and things like that, to get a second set of eyes on it. Let's make sure, especially with our Medicare agents, right? Let's make sure that the things are aligning, properly because with Medicare, I say it all the time. That's, everybody thinks that's, the first, it's all about a health decision. I say that it's the first financial decision that people actually make in retirement.
Oh
So
yeah.
when you start to look at some of the synergies, right, eliminating debt and, kind of getting people out of debt, heading into retirement, our Medicare agents are dealing with people that are probably really close to retiring or in fact already there, so we have more of the on-track retirement plan, and everybody in between with like, with index universal life and things like that. So there's a lot of different strategies. And then to take it even a step further, I was, able to bring a relationship along here to Lastly Mark where if any of you guys know, high net worth business owners, like that's not even a conversation that I'm probably equipped to have, at least the introductory calls. But when you dig in and understand some of the complexities, that these business owners are dealing with, some of these larger business owners, right? Like as a specialist, we also need specialists. Well, we have those individuals here that have done that work over the last, 20 plus years. So think of somebody that's, grossing over $1 million a year in their business, or anybody that's got 1.5 million or more. We talk about affluent marketplace, like their net worth. Thinking about how we could step in and help them, maybe reduce their annual tax liabilities, right? I mean, all business owners are going to be open-minded enough to at least have that conversation. Yeah, let's talk to me. And again, we're the missing piece. People have their lawyers and they have their CPA professionals and their financial advisors. It's all great. We are the missing piece. We're the ones that can come in and really help make a difference and kind of enhance, what's going on with, the other individuals that are already a part of it. So it's teamwork, it's joint work. It's the opportunity to be able to come in rather than have everybody work in those individual silos. We all get to come together to make sure that our clients, have everything in perfect alignment. And
Yeah.
that only happens when everybody's kind of working in unison. So, we really want to step in and not get in the way of what they do, but, kind of like I said, just, be the missing piece and be part of the team that they're already working with. So when you think
Yeah.
about everybody out there, I like to say, lastly, Mark, we really have something for everybody. It's just a matter of what direction we need to go with our conversation. All of that in conjunction to mortgage protection, Medicare, final expense, all of the things our agents are doing really well already. So it's just, looking for those additional opportunities.
Sure. Are the products kind of restricted to like life insurance, retirement planning, or is there an investment component that we can also engage with your team?
Yeah, so just so you guys, know we do have like we kind of do everything under one roof, So when we look at somebody's overall situation, I mean, we do have a registered advisory firm through, Charles Schwab. Now I'm not securities licensed. That also's, kind of been by design. Um, not, look, there would be value if I went and had that license. It's just in my career, I've kind of like I kept my focus in being really great in one area.
Hmm.
But we do that work. So for some of our, our clients that are looking for an opportunity to have their money managed, we do handle that in-house. Now, I can have conversations about Charles Schwab. I just can't manage the positions and I can't earn the fee. And because we can't earn the fee, our agents that make referrals, understand that sometimes is a part of what we do, but then there's also those safe money options and other things that we look at, where they're more, traditional insurance products where we can earn the commission. The fee based, we can't earn a fee. There's no referral fee as an agent. It's illegal to, to
Right.
basically pay a portion of that fee. But
Yeah.
on the, the other side where we're looking at safe money options, annuities, things like that, obviously the commissionable side, that's where our agents will earn that 50%.
Okay. Yeah. I'm actually securities licensed as well, and I was curious if there is a part of the retirement piece I can participate in on a referral, or if it's still because I'm not appointed with Lassie Mark, can I still participate in that retirement?
Yeah, yeah. You definitely can. And, one thing it's good to understand is that our agents, they get all their production credits, from like, the lasting mark side, and you look at the trips and things like that. as you get like when you submit in a case, even though you're only getting 50% of the commission, let's just say on the insurance side, you get 100% of the production credits. On
Ooh,
the side of, managed money there, they may not earn a commission, but let's just say the fee is $3,000. Well, they would get production credit of $3,000, just to give you an idea. So
Yep.
our agents that are referring that business in, I mean, they still do get, those production credits, and then obviously they're earning commissions where they can. But
Yeah.
yeah, there is that component. I mean, really, what we look at on the retirement side, when you talk about looking at all things under that umbrella. So think of your retirees. I mean, look, somebody heading into retirement is pretty excited, but at the same time, there's a lot of uncertainties about the future. So that's where our role is really to step in and help clear up some of those uncertainties. And we start, with an income plan. We're obviously going to make sure that it's a market safe plan. We really dig in. I think where we separate ourselves as an organization is really stepping in and helping with the proactive tax planning and understanding what that looks like now, but then also in the future, which is, it's ever changing. Asset protection and estate planning. We get into obviously the care plan, with again, a lot of the Medicare agents helping with, Medicare. Big one that we look at nowadays is long-term care and the exorbitant costs that are associated with it. And then if somebody's looking to have some of their money, still in the market, it's transparent and low investment fees. And what we look to do is kind of build out a retirement confidence score that I say the more confident they are, the more comfortable they are, more
makes
predictable
sense.
retirement's going to be. And they got a pretty good handle on how things look now. But they also, as we continue to work together year over year, they have that comfort level of knowing that they're going to be okay into the future. And what all of those things allow us to do, when you talk about like, basically, reducing fees, making sure, we can't get rid of taxes, but reducing taxes, making sure they're not giving more to Uncle Sam than they need to. Make the payment, let's not leave a tip. As I
Right.
like to
Yeah.
say, right?
Yeah.
And then making sure you're not going to be lost to market exposure. But that's just more of our clients' hard-earned money that they get to utilize in retirement. And the reality is that they get the opportunity to go and do all the things that they want to do, without the fear of outliving their money. And they can do it what I call during the go-go phase, which is as soon as they retire, before they hit the slow go and the no-go phase,
Yeah.
right? So you want to know that they can do these things early and that they're not going to run out of money. That's really the whole purpose of the exercise, again, is to make sure that we're eliminating, all of those uncertainties. And that's what we're able to do with our work. Now, I can tell you guys this, those conversations really are true elevate cases, right? I mean, those discussions for most of our agents, you really want to make sure you elevate, and it's a pretty thorough process, and we got a lot of things that we do behind the scenes to really put together. After our discovery meeting, we go back to roadmap, implementation, and then the review process. It's an extremely thorough process. So you always want to elevate those cases as it pertains to the life discussion. That's on the empower side, where depending on somebody's experience there, we'll kind of meet them where they are and help them wherever they need help. So there's just two sides of it. I really wanted to take the time to stress, between empower and elevate, making sure our agents understand the differences.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. A lot of things, one thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of people don't understand that your Medicare rates are based on your taxable income, right? So these products can reduce your taxable income and therefore reduce what you're paying for Medicare. Is that true? Fair to
Yeah,
say?
so when you look at Medicare, right? So we've all always understood, the term Uncle Sam, and we know what he does to us. But you get into retirement, and then you get to meet the counterpart, which is Aunt Irma. So I always got a kick out of that, right? The Irma costs. You start talking about like Part B, and yeah, there are thresholds, right? There's things that we look at. So kind of I get a handle on everybody that we work with. We get a handle on their income, by putting together a balance sheet. But then we can take a look at the inputs, and how that's going to pertain to taxes. So what's the effective tax rate, slash tax bracket? Obviously we know that's a lot of times based off of their Social Security. And if they're lucky enough to have a pension, we look at some of that stuff there. But then how do they start, utilizing some of their qualified plans like the 401k, 403b, TSP, whatever they have? How are they going to look to start taking some of those dollars? So we look at all of that. That's part of like I said, like the income plan. But then, you need to make sure some people do better than others in retirement, right? But then you got to kind of take a look at that, what they're bringing in, and kind of take a look at it from, the tax side of things. But then also you got to look at those IRMA brackets, and making sure that, again, we're not jumping up a couple of levels and having them pay a lot more for that, that Part B than they need to, right? So it's one of those things that, we kind of, that's where the teamwork comes in. We're kind of taking a look, and we talk about things being in alignment. That's really what we're referring to. So it's just making sure that people fully understand all of that. And most of our clients, we're kind of keeping them, they're certainly in alignment, but there are those instances where we got to get a little more creative.
Gotcha. Yeah. So a lot of times, it's great to have the option to refer business to or do the joint work. But a lot of times agents don't really understand the hooks or what to look for with the clients they're talking to. Like, for example, we have a final expense script and we're walking through the why and trying to get them to understand what happens if you don't put a small policy in place to cover your funeral. But how do they relate to that, or what do they look for? What questions can they ask within that script or after that would give them maybe something that they would be able to refer to your team? Or how would they go about making that introduction and finding that opportunity?
Yeah, and I guess well, let's do this. Let me ask you guys this, because the questions can differ, right? If you have a Medicare agent, I've kind of put together some questions that I think can help out. When you talk about cross-selling, I think if you're looking at even like health agents, there's I think a hook, with them. So, who would you say, like, I guess when you talk about your audience here, are we talking about, I guess mostly like, final expense agents,
Mostly final expense.
cross-selling?
Yeah, mostly my final expense and mortgage protection. There's a few who are doing a lot of IULs already, um, and we have a guy in our team with Empower Life Group who does annuities, and he's kind of like our internal um,
Hmm.
elevate fella. And um, but I think a lot of agents don't know how to connect the two potential opportunities to refer business.
Yeah,
I
no.
I can probably give one example of something that I have seen. I remember when I very first got my license in both health and life, I saw the annuities and I studied it for a little bit to see like what it would be needed for. But the moment I saw that it would require a separate, I think it's the SEC license or whatever, I was like, yeah, no, that's too much all at one time for me, right? But I
Yeah.
know the benefit it can provide people. So I know when I talk to a client, for instance, and we ask them the question of, well, like, do you have anything already that you possibly could use that might act as life insurance?
Mhm.
Like, say they have a work policy, or some of them they actually do have a savings, and they say that, well, I've already saved up 20,000 for this purpose. We pivot the conversation into being like, well, if you didn't want to use it for your funeral and filing arrangements, and there was another option for that, would you be interested in looking into that instead? And usually, if we do go through and get a policy, I would just leave it right there. But I'm pretty sure that's something that you should be pivoting to somebody else, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, and kind of revisit it at the end, because
Right.
that's interestingly, you bring up a great point. I think at some point, how we all kind of like learn, some of the same concepts along the way, right? Like I think a lot of the stuff that we talk about is nothing new. We just kind of recycle information. These ideas have been out there for a while. So that's precisely what I did, when I was doing a lot of the mortgage protection. I know when I was, a final expense agent, I was so busy trying to figure things out, like after
Exactly.
I left the world of working with Brian, and we did a lot of work site there. So we'd get into businesses, and then I always had Brian by my side. I mean, we did a lot of joint work. There were a handful of things I did on my own, but we predominantly did a lot of joint work when I was there. Like we really worked in tandem, and I was out there helping him with some things. So we kind of worked together in that regard. 'Cause, we doing work site, there's a lot of people to meet. So it was kind of like the two of us could divide and conquer, and we were winning together. But then, you move into, it's like, the final expense world. There were some other things to learn there, and how to get those appointments booked and meet with people. And then, again, with mortgage protection, but that is a really great, a part of it. Because after you go through those introductions and you're having that conversation, right? Like, if I booked an appointment with husband or wife, then I used to use a couple of minutes just to get us all on the same page and then move right into obviously why we were there. But before I did it, I would ask that question. What else do you have? As we say, it acts as life insurance. There's a couple of different ways that I've heard that asked.
Hmm.
But we know that those are beneficiary designated accounts. And the idea is that before you're going to make any type of recommendation, it's important to kind of find out what they have. But one of the things that was always key is, clarifying, hey, what was that? What's that for? Well, in
Right.
all those cases, it was retirement. right? So, it's not as though if they got sick, right? We talk about mortgage protection and living benefits. They couldn't come back to me and tell me, hey, well, I've got my 401k. Well, no, that's for retirement, right? And then there's some penalties and things that you have to contend with. There's other things, right? We needed to put a policy in place that would accomplish, what they had us out there for. But you're right. If they had, some of those, retirement plans or some of those older things, those were the areas where you could make a referral and we can have an opportunity to go out and see those individuals. So, what I would do is I was leaving, say, hey, listen, you mentioned to me that you had a 401k. I would always ask, are you actively contributing to it, or is it, like an old plan? Because a lot of times people leave their job and these things are just sitting out there lying dormant, right? So they get beat up by administrative fees and the ebbs and flows of the market. They see them lying dormant at best. And I would just earmark it. Like that was a question I was going to ask later because I didn't want anything to get in the way of the sale, right? I was out there to
Mhm.
give, mortgage protection, final expense. We weren't going to get into any of that. But
Yeah.
at the end, it was like, hey, you mentioned you had that old 401k. Are you happy with your current returns? And they're like, it's ups and downs, right? You get a lot of the same conversation. Yeah, it's not doing bad. Or no, I've actually seen it lose money, right? It just depends on what's going on out there. So I used to say, if I could, show you something that would allow you to participate in the upside of the market, but we could help eliminate those downside risks, would you be interested in taking a look? When I come back out and do the policy delivery, that's where we would lean in on that.
Mm.
Or I would just then, but that's a good place where you can then say, hey, listen, we have a retirement team. My job is, I specialize in this. But I would love to get you on a call where they're really just going to kind of talk to you and get to know you a little bit, see what's going on and see how they might be able to help you. That's the IUL conversation, and it really can be, on the retirement side as well. And I have a couple of good questions, that we can talk about here in a second that I think agents can ask, but I just wanted to address that point there. There are some unique ways of making it part of your conversation without being salesy. I think that's what keeps people from asking those questions in the home is they're fearful if they ask certain questions, they're going to lose the sale they just made.
Yeah.
Like it's going to somehow interfere. The thing to remember is that these families have a multitude of financial needs and they're going to go somewhere else and get those needs met. If they don't know that you do it, right? So we just have to have the courage to have the conversations, let them know what else that we do. And really our clients will do with that information what they will. If they have a need and they think that's been something that's on their mind, they're going to want to have a conversation and we can step in and help out with that.
Yeah. Right on. Well, I know one of the programs I was really intrigued by. I did a webinar last week on it as the debt to capital program. That's one of the things that we can utilize you guys for and refer you guys to for that. But it's not just retirement planning; it's getting out of debt, which is you kind of mentioned it before. We don't want to let people drag debt into retirement. Can you
No.
just kind of give us the highlights or a little bit overview of that
Yeah,
program? And
I would paint a couple of broad brush strokes, and it could be good, even if we came back around and did something in the future where we could talk a little bit more about maybe that program specifically.
Mhm.
That's one that you probably could dedicate the allotted time,
Yeah,
to just that topic, right? Because it's that robust. But debt is one of the biggest problems in America that we all face. Look, we all have debt. None of us like it, and I think we're all looking for ways to get rid of it, right? I understand that, debt, slash interest. I mean, look, it's provided some blessings to my family as well, right? I mean, I'm sitting in this home. I didn't pay cash for it, right? I have a mortgage. And we look at all the things that we have debt wise. One of the things I learned, early on when I saw this program is, all right, we all have debt. But the name of the game is how quickly we can get out of it, and what is your plan to do so? You hear about like, Dave Ramsey's traditional debt snowball, and there really isn't anything negative to it, but a lot of folks don't understand exactly how that works. They may be paying extra dollars to those debts, but a lot of times we see it kind of like spread across all the debts, and there's a reason they don't get rid of them. So what we are is really just a modified version of that debt snowball, instead of like, you have a debt, you pay it off, and then you're going to basically take, what you had in budget plus the minimum payment you freed up, and we're sending it to the next debt, the next debt, and the next debt. Right? Like we're not putting that money back in savings after we've paid off the debt. Doesn't make sense to do that when we have that big mortgage we're dragging out for 30 years, right? So what we want to do is we pay off each debt. We're basically applying more and more above and beyond the minimum payment to each passing debt. That's the traditional debt snowball. With what we do, it ends up being, you have the debt. Right now, what we're doing is let's just say we had a $500 a month, where right to your point, we found $500 a month in budget to get rid of our debt. That means you have to apply that $500 every single month, right? Now you start with the small credit card. Well, maybe you have an extra $100 that you're paying. Now you're paying $600 on that credit card until it's paid. Once that credit card's paid off, we then take that 500 that we had in budget plus the extra 100, right? What we're doing now is we're basically applying that to the next debt. It's in order from really smallest to largest, but you're focusing in on the smallest and working your way up. That's what we call the debt snowball. With our program, basically what we do is, let's just say we take that same $500, but that becomes, part of the premium. So what we're doing now is now our
Mm.
clients go back to making just minimum payments, on their debts, right? They're going to keep paying those down. At the same time, we're accumulating that cash value in the policy. Well, the software program we have does all the work for us. It lets us know when it's time. There's real cash accumulation, from the insurance carrier. There's real cash accumulation KPIs tied into the software. We also do a soft credit pool every single month to see where they are real time with their debts. So once there's an opportunity, hey, you have a Bank of America card at $1,000, you got $1,500 in the cash account, the system will send a text message to you and to me saying, hey, it's time to pay off your debt. Now we get together, it's a touch point. We get together and see if that's something you want to take care of, or is that just something you're going to knock out this month? But as time wears on, we're going to be starting to hit those bigger debts, because every month we make a payment, a portion of that premium payment goes to cash. The other half, basically goes to the cost of insurance. So the key to that whole plan is using a participating whole life. Not all whole lives are created equal, and they use a non-direct recognition dividend to make it all go. So what we've done is we've really just kind of tied together our presentation. We tie together the credit pool. We tie together, basically, just some of the, again, more of the presentation inside of it. But then what we have is, basically an instant decision whole life through the carrier GBU that's tied into that. So we really have a couple of different platforms sort of tied into one software. It's unlike anything else that's out in the marketplace. And, we have somewhat of an exclusive relationship there. Now, we have something that nobody else has. But having a conversation with somebody that has debt, as long as they're paying a little bit above and beyond those monthly minimums every month, they're an ideal client, as somebody that should absolutely be taking a look at this plan. And that opens the door to a lot of other things. Oh, they had an old 401k that's sitting out there. Oh, they need some more traditional life coverage. What we do with this plan, what's great about it, even if you've helped your clients out with some other form of insurance, you've added a monthly expense, right? Anything you're selling, final expense, mortgage protection, tax-free retirement, that's in budget. What we end up doing is finding, really, like, what are they paying above and beyond minimums? You know what I mean? Like, that they're applying, right? This is already part of their budget. What's going into savings? Anything they're putting in above and beyond a company match on the 401k. We get our hands on those forbidden funds, right? That otherwise are keeping families on safe ground. We get that extra money that we can reallocate into this program to help them accomplish their goals more efficiently. So this is a real different conversation. The money's already in budget. We find the dollars that are already going out the door. So, this is one of those ones that's really not adding a new spend to the monthly budget. We're just reallocating dollars that are already a part of it. Anything above like those minimum payments, right? And I would say the average is about $500, that we basically see per month with these cases, which is, really great referral in, income to the agents that are referring these cases.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
tremendous opportunity, right? And that's a new concept that has just been rolled out here really since conference. We've done 2 trainings. We're really just getting started with that plan. We really didn't have that software ready until probably about March,
Oh,
where it was a 2-year build, but we had agents going through it, from the end of last year through the beginning, just ironing out the kinks. Everything
mhm.
was working, but there were just some hiccups, things that we worked through as a team. And, now it's ready for the masses.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you can't shake a stick without hitting somebody who's got a mountain of debt they're trying to get out from under. So finding people should be a piece of cake,
Well,
right?
yeah, Corey, here's the thing about it, right? And Ty, there's 82% of all households in America have some form of debt or another. The average household is looking at about $105,000 worth of debt. So listen, I say this, everybody out there qualifies for a conversation. Anybody passing by right now qualifies for a conversation. Through that conversation, we can see if they qualify for our program, right? Now, if somebody's robbing Peter to pay Paul, as my parents used to say, yeah, this is probably not going to be a viable program. This would be a burden. But if you find somebody that's paying their debts as agreed, and in fact are applying a little bit extra every month in an attempt to get rid of the debt, that's our ideal prospect, and we want to have a conversation with them. And then we take them through our conversation. It really does a lot of the heavy lift, and all we're really looking to do is show them how it works. Like I said earlier, what these people do with the information is up to them. But I hate to use the term no brainer, but and the money's already gone out the door, and we show them how they can eliminate their debts in half the time or less without refining, and then build that cash account that can be used for future spends. That's how we're turning today's debt to capital. Thus the namesake of the program. They have that capital to use down the road, and maybe even in their retirements, it's part of their spend account. So again, really strengthen. And you can see why this is all encompassing when you talk about the retirement conversation. That debt elimination program is really a big part of it because you're helping people shake the liabilities while at the same time, helping them grow the asset.
Gotcha. So if it's exclusive to Lasting Mark, then people should come to work with Lasting Mark to get access to it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's an awesome recruiting tool because look, our vendor partner, I mean, I will be clear, it's not one of those things where it just was designed and built for Lasting Mark. It's
Right.
at the company that I worked with previously. There's a handful of agents utilizing it there, and then ourselves. But I can tell you, our vendor partner's not. He doesn't have the interest in going out and acquiring a whole lot of IMOs, marketing organizations, because of what comes with it. He would
Yeah.
rather he knows, likes, and trusts us. He would rather these people come in through us. You see where we're going with that?
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely.
So it's an excellent recruiting tool. And here's what's great about the debt programs. You may come across an agent who likes where they are.
Yeah.
They're fine doing final expense where they're at in mortgage protection. Well, here's what they don't have: the debt to capital program. So all we need to do is contract them with GBU, get them on the software, and have them start referring us, obviously start referring us some business, and we can do joint work with them.
There you
A lot
go.
of times and we do have like a referral, from a software perspective, there is a referral program there, so they have access to the software at a fraction of the cost. And, we have it all set up, for those types of relationships. So you think about, ways to recruit where it's not an all or nothing. This is an opportunity to get to work with some agents that, like I said, they kind of like where they are doing some of the things we do, but we have this debt program that they don't have, and they're not going to want to miss out on those opportunities. So that referred business is coming to you guys, to your specialists, if you will.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, I think we should probably do a part two because there's a lot more to go into with
Well, there
that.
is. Yeah, man. And
Yeah.
when I get going, guys. I'm Philly fast with the information, but I'm just passionate about what we do. But there is a lot to discuss there. Today's just to kind of like say, hey, there's a lot of opportunity for joint work at Lasting Mark, and in all of our individual organizations. You're meeting people that have, again, a multitude of financial needs. What you have to understand, if you didn't already before maybe listening in today, is that we can do it all here. And you don't have to be the one to know it all. You just need to be able to find somebody inside the organization that can help you do it, that does know it, until you're comfortable enough to do it on your own. And I mean, that's really the premise of joint work. Make half the commission, and all you got to do is tee it up. I say peak and pass, pique their interest, get it on the calendar, and we basically can take it from there.
Yeah. You do the calls over Zoom or video, or is it
Yeah.
just phone calls?
Yeah, no, everything we do is via Zoom. We always like to put a face with the name. I tell people all the time, I get the great privilege of traveling around the country. A lot of our agents are working with people local, but I kind of step in, and this is like, hey, you get the team concept. In addition to you, Corey, you get me as it pertains to this discussion, but I kind of highlight you, and everything flows through you, and we work together on this. I mean, you guys need to understand, is in our role, you guys are our clients. Your clients belong to you, right?
Hmm.
So you, the agent, are our clients. Our job's to make you look good. We just want to be an extension of your brand. We want to come in and really just be an extension of the service that you've already provided, and say, hey, we can better serve the client, which makes the original business stickier. And there's an opportunity, really to better serve the client first. The agent gets an opportunity to make additional dollars. So if you find multiple sales on one lead, now if you're looking at it from a business perspective, you're driving down lead costs, you're more profitable. But then also the agency, our managers, the agency is going to be more profitable and lasting, Mark. So it's the old saying, the rising tides, raises all ships. I think this is one of those things that, it really rings true there because, we all win together. And in my opinion, nobody more than the client.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, if somebody wants to engage your team, elevate a case, or just get some help with an illustration, for example, what's the best way to get in touch with you guys within Lasting Mark? And sorry, if you're outside of Lasting Mark, you're out of luck. You got to come to
Yeah,
Village.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's it. You're not what lasting mark. You got to get yourself over here. So, one of the ways that, you're really going to do that is you're going to go in and do that through Link. We have our agent access, and somebody can go in the back. If you're looking at like, annuity and retirement support, then there's, an opportunity to go in there, and there's a case assistance form in there. So it kind of goes, round robin. We've got an incredible team of individuals on the retirement group headed up by, Pat Schmidt. We have our advisors, Eric Miller, Sam Russo, Jared Knoll, Tristan Tillman, Cole McVeigh, and then Captain Jay Karate. If you haven't met him, he's kind of been working with Pat since the beginning. He's been around, great guy. He's doing a lot of the training and development of our agents, in house, where I get a lot of opportunity to do training and development with agents out in the field, and so together we're doing some great things. And then we have an awesome internal team with Amanda Fetty and Amber, and Tristan plays a part in that. So we have those individuals that are more behind the scenes. So there's an entire team here, and we're all employees of Lasting Mark, right? So from a trust, it boils down to one word: trust. So from a trust perspective, I mean, we are Lasting Mark, and we're gonna, obviously take good care of you and your clients. But you would basically go in and do that through Link, and it goes round robin. I wanted to kind of mention who our agents are, because depending on availability, it'll hit one of our agents, and every one of these individuals I would trust with my own family, to basically help out with, retirement planning. If you guys get into some things, on the life side, you can reach out, to me directly. But just know, when you go in there, again, I'm saying it's lastingmark.com. You guys all should be familiar with, like, the link in our back office. Again, you go into retirement and annuity support. And again, there's a case assistance form. There's some other really good, like, sales tools back there. There's, retirement 101 training, case assistance form. Always say, like, annuity sales tools. But then there's also another tab that you guys should see in there too. It's like what we call that 60-minute initial client meeting. So if you're clicking on those links, basically what you're going to do is complete the information, and that's going to go directly to the team. You guys will get a Zoom invite so that you can join the meeting. And it'd be like, say, for myself here, Corey, if you're introducing us to Ty, the three of us are on. Corey, you'll make the introduction, and then we'll run through and have the discussion and help. And then in the subsequent calls, everything will really kind of be set by you guys, right, Corey? Like, you would set the meeting with Ty, and we would get back together again, to do that secondary meeting, where it's necessary. So it's a very thorough process, but that's where you would do it. Then if anybody had, any questions for me specifically on some of, like, the IULs, the debt elimination program, they could just reach me at joe.skelley, it's Skelley, and then that's at lastingmark.com. Probably be the best way to reach out. And then what we could do is, work to schedule an appointment and talk through whatever, on their minds. But understand this: as you guys, represent an organization, my role here is to help, your specialist. If you have somebody that's working annuities, or somebody wants to work life, obviously, you guys, maybe somebody eventually takes on this debt to capital plan. My job is really to help all of you make sure you're doing everything the right way. So
Right.
if you need some support, lean on me. I mean, eventually, all agencies should have, somebody that can help in-house with these types of things. But until you have that individual, our team is there. So just make sure that, you guys are leaning on us, and utilize us where you can. Even if somebody that's listening is kind of stepping in to be the guy that does annuities, or is working life, let's just work together to make sure that everything's being done the right way, as I like to say.
Nice. Yeah, that's another great example of how much support we have here at Lasting Mark with Empower Life Group and Sniper Insurance, which is the team we're both on. So it's a amazing environment that you don't really get when you're off on your own business, like some
No.
agents are.
Now, this type of process doesn't exist anywhere, and I would probably leave you guys with this. I think with a lot of organizations that I've been with previously, I mean, first of all, it's a lot of self-proclaimed, claim specialists. You don't really know if they know what they're doing or not.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, everybody that, there's heavy, extensive training that we go through, even if we've been in this thing for a while. I mean, I spent the entire month of August, really going through a pretty heavy training process with Pat and Jay, because the conversation may not have been new, but the process certainly was. And we want to make sure that, I'm not going to practice on somebody else's people, right? Like, we need to make sure that I'm ready to go before I run that very first meeting. And so I can promise you, everybody's gone through extensive training on our back end to do it the lasting Mark way, again, we're all employees of the company. So, you don't have to worry about, nobody's trying to take anybody's clients. Like I said, the word trust is a big deal there when you talk about referring. And
Hmm.
I think that the other thing is really once you hear all these, these ideas of referring is just as agents, really understanding just what it is you're referring to. And hopefully this call today, kind of helps out with that, where you can feel confident, when you do refer somebody over, that you got somebody that's going to properly take them through the process. But,
Absolutely.
like I said, we definitely want to make sure that, like I'm here to really help teach, train, and support, agents that are already maybe been doing this thing a little bit, for a while, or, maybe they're looking to say, hey, I want to be that person inside the organization. Again, can't stress enough, we can help with it. And I got to talk to somebody, might as well be somebody over there. So just reach out and give me a call.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on today. It was a great conversation, and I learned a lot, and I hope to be using you guys a lot more. I just haven't really thought about it or built it into my process, but it certainly will be doing that because there's a lot of opportunity that are being missed. So
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. What I love about Lasting Mark is all verticals are celebrated, whether you're Medicare, final expense, we call that life, or your traditional life. And there's even like, group benefits, division that's kind of like off and running. We all wear the Lasting Mark team jersey, right? We're all in this thing together. So we all support one another at the top. I mean, leadership is in lockstep with one another on all of this. And again, it's just, I think it's raising awareness to say, all right, we know these individuals are out there, but who are they? Can we trust them? What do they do? How can they help me? And if this time here today didn't, really provide all the clarity that an agent needs, that's where again you just reach out, and if Corey, you have my contact information, if somebody wants to reach out to you or Ty, and you guys want to send them my way, again, it's just going to have a conversation to make sure that they're clear on all the things that we can assist with.
awesome. Awesome. Well, Ty, you got anything else for Joe?
Man, I just want to say thank you. Honestly, like listening to the debt to capital thing, I didn't want to be selfish, but I feel so vindicated. Like we mentioned earlier, how people have savings, and a lot of times we're
Mhm.
told and taught to save just for the sake of saving, as opposed to it having a purpose. And listening to you explain how the process works, I'm not going to say I've really understood it, but if I had to put it in
Yeah.
simple terms, it sounded like you said that you guys believe that it is a much smarter idea to, instead of using your extra money to pay down debts faster, use the extra money to build an asset that you can
Mhm.
borrow from to pay off the debt later.
That's
Is
it.
that right? Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
man, like that.
no, I mean that's
It's
it.
just mind blowing.
I mean, you have it. I mean, if you understand, like I said, the debt snowball, all we are is a modified version of it. I don't agree with a lot of the things that Dave says outside of, debt snowball. But you go
Glad
Google
it's
debt
not just
snowball.
me.
What's a, yeah, no, I mean, there's other ideas. You maybe lost me there a little bit, but when you look at just, applying a little bit extra to your debt in an attempt to get rid of it, the faster you pay off the debt, the more of that interest stays home in your bank account as opposed to
Hmm.
going to the bank account of the banks and lenders we ultimately borrowed from. So there's nothing negative around it. It's just
Right.
it's understanding a concept that can help you get out. I always tell you a lot of times it gets you out in about a third of the time. So I can tell you I'm in the program and I went from 28 years because I did the refi during the boom like everybody else, got the lower rate, but I'm getting out of my debt will all be gone 11 and a half years in. I'm almost 4 years in on 11 and a half year plan. So, at 48, you look at the fact that I was going to be like 57 years old, 100% debt free. Now we're in insurance. We have better months than some of our counterparts where it's fixed income, right? Our peers. We could have a really big month. I'll just apply that extra money to the mortgage balance. But my point is,
Mm.
worst case scenario, I'm 11 and a half years. If I can get out sooner and I'm on track to get out in 8, that means that I go into retirement with I don't owe anybody. Like I said, the expenses are there, but the most important part is I have a huge cash account that I can use to do the things that I want to do in retirement when I get there.
Yeah,
That's
So,
beautiful.
that was the kind of missed. I was like, you get through the debt snowball, the debt to capital program. It's not just that your debt is paid off; you also have a cash value balance that you can now leverage further. It's not just
yeah,
at zero; you're actually way ahead. So
100%.
awesome.
Man, I
100%.
appreciate it. I
Yeah.
definitely learned a lot
So,
this one.
Hey, well, likewise, man. I appreciate you guys inviting me on. Like I told Corey, anything I can do to help the greater good of the team, you know what I mean? Your organization, the Lasting Mark team, just to get these ideas out there. I mean, that's what I'm all about. That's where my passion's at is, for the agent and the client. I mean, that's just I really enjoy working with both, and I feel like in either instance, you're making an impact on a family one way or another. But like I said, anything I can do to ever help you guys, just reach out. I'm happy to do so.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Thanks for listening to the Dialing for Dollars podcast. If you enjoyed the show, like, subscribe, and share it with another agent who's still calling leads at 8 p.m. Have a good one.